The three-row crossover market is booming right now, and Japanese companies like Honda, Toyota, and Nissan have benefited the most. Subaru, on the other hand, though, has been selling tons of smaller crossovers, but they have left the three-row market unoccupied. That is, until now. Subaru has applied their successful crossover formula to its largest application yet, the all-new Ascent. This is a model aimed squarely at segment leaders, like the Honda Pilot, which we are comparing it with today. So let's go ahead and see if the new kid on the block can take down an established leader. Like always, the first thing on the agenda is establishing the pricing and equipment levels we are dealing with. Starting with the Pilot, we have the fully loaded Elite trim, whose MSRP is $47,470 with standard all-wheel drive. Since Honda doesn't really do options, all we have to add is the destination charge, to arrive at a total of $48,445. For the Subaru, there's immediately an advantage, since it will always cost less at comparable trim levels. At the time of this video, the Ascent is not on sale, so this limited trim is the only one we could have access to. However, since we have the technology package, we have almost all of the same features as the Touring. By my count, there are only 6 small differences between the trims, so for fairness sake, we'll be counting those features and grading it as if it were the top shelf Touring. Even that model rings in significantly cheaper than the Pilot, at $45,670 with destination. So our official price difference between fully loaded to fully loaded is going to be $2,775. The Ascent will receive 1 point per $1,000 of price advantage, starting it off with 2. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the comparison. Starting off, both have smart entry systems and nice solid feeling key fobs. The difference here is that on the Subaru, you either have to buy a separate fob or subscribe to an app to use remote start. The doors will unlock automatically via sensors behind the handles. Just like in our full reviews, we'll start off by comparing the powertrains. So under the hoods, these two couldn't hardly be any more different. While Honda went with the traditional route of using a naturally aspirated 3.5-liter V6, Subaru instead went with a new turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. This turbo boxer makes plenty of power at 260 horsepower and 277 pound-feet of torque. But the Pilot still has a beat with 280 horsepower and 262 pound-feet of torque. As far as putting power to the ground, the Subaru has the advantage, with symmetric torque vectoring all-wheel drive and a dedicated X mode for off-roading. However, it does have a CVT with 8 simulated gear changes instead of an actual 9-speed automatic. Most people prefer the feel of a traditional automatic, so I'll give the point to the Pilot. The only real similarity here is the combined fuel economy. They both come in at 22 combined. Well, that covers the basics of the powertrains, so now let's move on to the exterior designs and features. Even though this comparison is mostly objective, I will evaluate the front and rear styling in general. Starting with the Subaru, you have their typical design language just blown up. It looks pretty aggressive, but without being too much like some rivals can be. The Pilot, on the other hand, has a very unaggressive grille that unfortunately looks very close to the last generation CR-V. The grille does nicely integrate into the headlights, which are LED low beams with LED daytime running lights. The Ascent has dynamic turning full LED lights, plus it has LED fog lights where the Pilot has halogens. So overall, the Ascent's look is more aggressive and upscale, so it'll get the point. Around back, it's the same kind of deal. Both have LED taillights, but the Pilot's design is extremely boring compared to the Subaru's, since it lacks any chrome or exposed exhaust pipes to spice things up. The Ascent will also take the rear point. While we're back here, I'll mention the towing. They can both handle up to 5,000 pounds as equipped, which is basically the same as everything else in the class. Now let's switch back into all the objective points. Starting up front, the Ascent has significantly more ground clearance, as you would expect, at 8.7 inches versus 7.3. That may not matter to the average consumer, but it does matter to Subaru owners. The Ascent can also make a U-turn with about 1.5 feet less space. Moving on to the wheels, both SUVs have nice looking 20-inch contrast alloys, with designs that are honestly very similar. For the mirrors, they are both body colored, power adjusting, heated, and have LED turn signals. They also both have blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert, which can only be seen from the inside. As far as warranties go, they both have the same 3-year 36,000 mile bumper-to-bumper warranty, and 5-year 60,000 mile powertrain warranty. Neither come with any complimentary maintenance. But more important than that is safety, and both these vehicles treat it as a top priority. While we don't yet have any official ratings for the Ascent, it and the Pilot come with a suite of active safety technologies. They include automatic emergency braking, lane keeping assist, adaptive cruise control, and automatic high beam headlights. Just be aware that 3 out of those 4 systems come standard on all trims of the Ascent, versus only the top 2 trims of the Pilot. The last thing worth mentioning is the fuel tank. The Honda has a 19.5 gallon tank, and the Subaru 19.3. So since they have the same combined fuel economy, the Pilot has a slight fuel range advantage. The actual numbers are 429 miles of range on the Pilot, and 425 miles for the Ascent. Well, that's it for the exteriors, but the reason you buy a vehicle like this is for the inside, so let's go ahead and check that out. At first glance inside, it's immediately obvious that these two were made for maximum versatility. Our Pilot has a light colored beige interior, and the Ascent an ebony interior, but both still use a nice mixture of dark and light materials all around. I will mention that the Touring Ascent does come with a brown interior instead, with some fake wood trim. The seats themselves are made of real leather and are 10-way power adjusting on both. That said, the Subaru still has the upper hand since it also includes manual thigh extension. Additionally, they are both 3-stage heated, ventilated, and have 2-stage memory. First looking around, the designs look fairly rich, though the Pilot's looks a little more aged. The actual material quality on both is good. On the Ascent, all the upper areas are made from soft touch plastic with nice stitching details. And then in the middle, you have a swath of stitched leather to class things up further. Otherwise, everything else feels very solid. On the Pilot, you have very similar materials, with stitched soft touch plastic on the top portions. In the middle, Honda gives you piano black trim. And once again, lower areas are hard touch, but feel solid and durable. However, for the door trims, there is a substantial difference, with the Ascent using contrast stitched and perforated leather to cover almost everything. The Pilot uses mostly padded plastic, so for this area, the Subaru is the clear winner. For both, press the button to start. When you do, each has an 8-inch display which will boot up. I'll evaluate the software a little later in the video. Moving on to the gauges, this is another area the two are very far apart on. The Pilot went for a high-tech look, while the Subaru went traditional. Both displays are 4.2 inches and contain the usual driving information. For the steering wheels, they are leather wrapped and control the electric rack and pinion power steering. They are loaded with buttons, including for the standard heating, but neither have power tilt and telescoping. Of course, one of the main reasons you would buy something this big is to have lots of storage, and both have it in spades. The Pilot actually uses minivan armrests to allow for stuff to be set on top of and inside of the extremely deep bin. The Subaru's is not quite as versatile. And then up in the front, you have another phone-sized bin with charging USB ports and other connections. The Ascent does have a little shelf, but overall the Pilot still wins in this area. Moving on to shifters, Subaru went traditional and Honda went futuristic again. Normally I have a strong preference for normal shifters, but in this case the Honda's is quite easy to use and the Subaru's is really ugly. Once you go into reverse, both have high quality backup cameras with trajectory and parking sensors. Subaru, however, also gives you a separate 180-degree front camera that appears in the top helper screen, so I'll give it a point here. Moving up, both models have tri-zone automatic climate controls. While they look different, the functionality is nearly identical. And I appreciate that both use physical controls instead of hiding functions within the infotainment screens. Now let's go ahead and sample the audio systems. While the Pilot system is decent, it's no match for the Subaru's genuinely impressive setup. Plus, having no volume knob is annoying. Now that takes us to the infotainment systems, so let's take a quick look. Starting with the Pilot, it still has the older Honda Link system instead of the newer one like in the Odyssey. The functionality isn't necessarily that different, but the new system does make things easier to understand and increases the processing power. We do have both Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, or you can use the integrated navigation if you prefer. One con is that the screen is a little insensitive. The Subaru also had a bit of trouble with sensitivity for touches but not swipes. Other than that, the system has a cleaner look than Honda's, but all the functions are pretty much the same. It also has Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, and integrated navigation. So overall, I'll call this area a draw. Wrapping things up, both vehicles come with auto-dimming rearview mirrors, but the Ascent is a smart camera on the Touring. It allows you to see the rear view unobscured by passengers or cargo. The last difference worth mentioning is the panoramic moonroofs. They both obviously have one, but it's worth noting that the Ascent is one continuous piece. Well, that pretty much wraps up everything to look at on the interior. So now let's look at the very important rear areas. Starting with the rear door trim, thankfully neither brand skimped out, with the same leather trim as in the front. Both also have sunshades for maximum comfort. Turning our attention to the back seats themselves, they both have almost exactly the same legroom, at 38.4 and 38.6 inches respectively. However, the Pilot does have significantly more headroom, coming in with about 2 additional inches. You can, by the way, get captain's chairs on the Ascent as a no-cost option. As far as rear amenities go, they both have their own climate adjustments back here. and also multi-stage heated rear seats on these high-end trims. Below that, the Pilot has a ton more connections, including a very useful household outlet. Some of those connections are associated with the rear entertainment system. Honda offers you a comprehensive setup with wireless headphones, while Subaru will only sell you an iPad, which you probably already have. Getting into the third row is easy in both, but only Honda makes it hands-free with only one button. Once in the back, you have an acceptable amount of space, but I won't go into the official numbers since it's kind of pointless. Both do have cup holders and dedicated vents, but only the Ascent gives you 2 smart charging USBs. Moving around to the rear, both crossovers have power tailgates, but neither have foot activation. Once they open, the Subaru surprisingly beats the Pilot across all seating configurations. With the third rows up, we have 17.8 cubic feet of space in the Subi, and 16 in the Honda. With those seats folded, it is 47.5 versus 46. And with the second row folded, it is 86.5 versus 83.8. Well, with that, we conclude this in-depth comparison video. While the points show a definitive winner, I will say that as an overall package, the two are quite similar. If you are serious about purchasing, definitely check them out in person. Thanks for joining us on this Car Confections comparison, and be sure to subscribe for more comparisons and our signature full review videos.